Okay. All right. Hey, everybody. We are a little bit early today, a little bit earlier than we have been in the past. We're moving it back just a little bit, just because I am jam packed and I need a few moments to decompress. And my office manager looks at me like I'm insane every time. So we're going to move back just a few minutes. But here we are. All right. And, I hope you all had a wonderful Halloween, but we did, and we saw the effects of it too, right? And so a little bit of candy, a little bit of woo, woo, woo. Bedtime was a little bit rougher than normal. And this time of year, we see a lot of this, okay? I'm all for having fun, trick or treating, that's all good. But a lot of times this time of year, kiddos get overstimulated, get Halloween candy, and then we have Thanksgiving and all that wonderful stuff that happens. So not being critical of any of this stuff, but this is a tough time of year sometimes for parents to get burned out real quick just because there's just so much going on. The kiddos get burned out so quickly. So let's talk a little bit about that. Heather and I are going to kind of start talking about this a little bit earlier this year. I thought that'd be a good idea just to have parents prepped. Usually we did a couple weeks. Now we're starting at the beginning of November, getting ready for Thanksgiving and Christmas time. So let's jump into that. I mean, Heather, I don't know about you, but I was like, there's something in the air. A little before Halloween too, but there's something in the air. There's something in the environment. Kids are a little extra energy this time of year. But what do you all see? Something similar?
Yes, and I think part of it is last year so many holiday plans were canceled, and so this year it's like, hey, we get to celebrate, and it just feels like, which is great, but it's kind of like the stir crazy stuff is kind of going next level earlier, and there might be bigger, brighter, better celebrations to make up for last year. And so I feel like that vibe that has started early has something to do with that, at least in part,
100%. Yeah. This Halloween, everybody was kind of saying that, right? They were just saying, hey, we didn't get to really do a whole lot last year. We're kind of going a little bit bigger this year. They were like, my kids are they're like, have as much candy as you want. I'm like, no, don't tell them that, sort of deal there, but they wanted to celebrate. And I get it. We were all kind of wound up. So let's talk a little bit about this, because if everybody is going a little bit bigger this year because of last year, what are some things kind of going into, let's talk about specifically Thanksgiving as we get ready for that. What are some things that you're telling parents to kind of prep them for this idea of what could happen, or, some tips and tricks?
Yeah, a few things, but to link it to what you're saying about Halloween, first of all, is what you eat matters, and it doesn't have to be all or nothing. So like you're saying, there's moderation. And I know that sounds like common sense, but we know that we might be like, I ate too much at Thanksgiving, and then big deal, you sleep it off and you're fine, or the next day. But for kids with neurodevelopmental struggles, understand that they already have these food sensitivities, and their little brains are still developing, and they are more reactive, more responsive to things that we have a night of like, where am I need my sweatpants. Where's the elastic waist? They can have impact on their emotions and behaviors and responses for days. 100%. And it doesn't mean, just to clarify, doesn't mean those things cause ADHD, cause sensory processing, but they are 90% of the kids we work with have some food sensitivity. So what everyone else can eat, and not a big deal, it is for them. Everything's individualized. So that's one thing. It's very important to anticipate where the struggles are going to be and to plan in advance. And so that's where, like with your kids, where you talk about social stories and here's what's going to happen, but also very important is talking to your loved ones who are super helpful and have so much, great advice for you and things that you could do to parent better. That can be really tough. Some of that's well-meaning. Some of it might not be. Your family, but a lot of it is. But having those conversations in advance so that you're not feeling uptight, there's not arguments happening about bad parenting, or if you discipline your child more, this wouldn't happen, or, getting mad at the kids or you, or having those conversations in advance. And there are ways to do that. And so I'd like to really prep families for that.
Awesome. I actually kind of want to blend the two ideas that you talked about, right? Which was, so one of the things that, we specifically Brittany and I start talking to our kids about is, say, look, holiday seasons are coming up, Halloween's coming up. There's nothing wrong with some candy. We want to have that stuff. That's fun. We need to celebrate as a family and as a community, all that stuff. But we need to realize that we cannot eat all this candy in one sitting, right? And so prepping them for the idea that there may be some foods that we're maybe not going to partake in, or we're going to be more conservative with our consumption with that, so that we're not at the table saying, hey, no more of this. So the idea that we're kind of prepping them for that idea, right? Like, hey, you know what? Thanksgiving, there's pie. You can have a little bit of pie. You can't have half a pie, but you can have a little bit of pie. And prepping them for that idea that it's okay to have some of this stuff, but the idea that we're not going to just go, this is the only thing that we can eat. And that there might be things before that we have to eat in order to eat our dessert too. So,
yeah. When you do that, it's huge. I love that. I'm huge on telling parents to prep their kids for potential disappointment before it happens, but also help them brainstorm something good that is the flip side of that. Like if they have a cousin they're really close to, Jason's not going to be there this year. But guess who is going to be there? So you're prepping them for the disappointment, but also help them brainstorm the good, because there is a good side of virtually every point.
Yeah, absolutely. But just to talk about that, preparation is key. Lots of the kids that we work with struggle with prediction. And so when we go in and there's a lot of prediction, right? Maybe faces we're not familiar with, maybe foods that we're not as familiar with, maybe whatever it may be. There's a lot of, familiarities that we're not comfortable with, that maybe you and I are comfortable with as parents, all that fun stuff, but they're not, right? Especially if they've been a little bit more sheltered this year, right? And they haven't had some of these exposures. The idea of prepping them well ahead of time and then having continued conversations with them, right? Hey, in a couple of weeks, you're going to go to grandma and grandpa's house. And, like you mentioned, so-and-so may or may not be there, or, all of this stuff. And so I like to get my kids, like we started talking about Halloween at the beginning of October. And, we did it in fun ways, right? Like, hey, let's go pick up a costume. This is what we're going to do on Halloween. And, and I feed that conversation. And so prepping them now at the beginning of November for what may happen in a few weeks is key, because let's be honest, they need more than one conversation, one little reminder about this, and give their brains a little bit of time to mull this over and come back to them, right?
Yeah. An example that has hit me that is very personal is I shared last week that my aunt died last week, and we have a number of kids in the family who have neurodevelopmental differences on the autism spectrum, ADHD, sensory processing, etc. And so even understanding that background knowledge is different. So even if, and I'm bringing this up because a lot of people have lost loved ones throughout the pandemic, or there might be sickness and somebody is not able to attend even if they're still with us. But not to assume necessarily, your kids, but think about this, just because even if they attend a memorial service and you have that conversation at the beginning of November, by the time Thanksgiving or Christmas rolls around, some kids would not know that means that my Aunt Joanne is permanently gone. And she was an amazing lady, and they are going to miss her. So not thinking it's a one and done, but sprinkling that and making those connections, because that is a very abstract concept, sort of, because maybe they don't see her all the time anyway. So we saw her, she went away, but she's going to be back for the holiday. Just be thinking in terms of, what do we need to explicitly talk about? What books can we buy on a topic that's difficult to discuss, where we have these conversations and we're just gently keeping that narrative going, so that there's not a big surprise that's very hard, when those times roll around.
Yeah, I love that, because even as adults, right? We lose a friend or a loved one, and even though we may logically know they're not going to be at this party, the idea of when you get there and they're not there kind of hits you a little bit sometimes. You're like, oh, this is actually real. And so a lot of times these kids struggle with that. They don't make the same connections. And even adults sometimes just don't even understand, completely put it all together. Because I've been there before, and that loved one's out there, and you're like, oh, they're really not here. And so, 100%, I
Right.
love that that idea of just walking them through that conversation repeatedly so that they're prepped. I'm going to throw out one of my favorite things right now, and that is a decompression time, or it's okay to leave the dinner table time, meaning we're not used to a table of 12, 15. Our old my aunt used to throw a ton of Thanksgiving parties, and it would be 50 or 60 in a house, and multiple people yelling over each other. That would be a ton for a kid. And so just the idea that we can escape, right? I don't have to sit here. I can go decompress a little bit, right? That's so important for safety and emotional health and all of that stuff. So a lot of times these kids need a few minutes by themselves. Read, color, just do something to decompress a little bit.
Yeah.
And so that's one of my favorite tips.
Oh, I'm huge on that. Like, it's very important to remember that emotional overwhelm, sensory overwhelm is cumulative. It is usually not about one moment in time. And so before you're having a big day, try to have quiet time even on days before it, as well as planning for some quiet decompression time after a big trip or time with the family. But then also, like when you're reading social emotional books or social stories and planning ahead and talking to your family, you're talking about when this happens, I may feel this way. Here are some things I can do. I can ask to be excused from the table. I can go outside and take a walk in the backyard. We're already talking about the strategies. So they're prepped and you're rehearsing. It's like dress rehearsal for that. And then you also tell your relatives, talk about the struggles your kids have. And these are things we've worked out. Here's why this is necessary. So if they're doing this, they are not being disrespectful. It's self-care. It's very important. Here's why we're doing it, so that they don't get offended or make comments. So you're kind of taking care of a lot of the check marks on things that are really good to prep by doing that.
Okay, so I want to highlight this because what Heather said was fantastic. It's a cumulative sensory, right? It's not like typically not a single event that is the kind of what gets everything going. Because if you think about it, whether everybody's getting ready Wednesday evening for food and food prep, and then we go into Thursday, and then it's Black Friday, and then Saturday you have a game. I mean, that's 4 days of cumulative buildup of events and going. And if you're churning, you're really churning by Saturday. Come Sunday, if not before that, and then you can be right back into school really early in the beginning of that next week, Monday or Tuesday, and that can burn a kid out super fast. And so I love the idea of prepping not only breaks during those days, but decompressing before and after some of that stuff is so crucial. Just all of us need it.
Yeah. And strategize. Do they have to go with you to your Black Friday shopping? Can somebody else keep them? Like, really just think in advance. If you are sitting there thinking my kid's behavior is erratic, good one day, bad the next, that almost certainly has a sensory processing component to it. It has some emotional regulation components. And so it is about the buildup. And once they get to that threshold, blah. And then they probably have settling time, even if it's not planned that way, where they kind of get back down to even keel, and it builds. So erratic behavior doesn't mean choice. It means I'm at my threshold. No, I'm not. Now I am. Now I'm not. What is causing them to get to that threshold?
I love that. Okay. One last thing that I just want to talk about is, and Heather, I think probably originally brought this up, but I love the idea is as we get ready for Thanksgiving and, assuming that you are prepping something, right? Or, my mom always made us boys wear the same, outfit or whatever, but having them involved, right, in the moment, right? So maybe picking out their clothes that they want to wear that day, or helping you prep the food, giving them some input into it, giving them some control in the moment and in the excitement of it all can really go a long way. I tell you what, my kids love nothing more than to help, prep the food or, pick their own clothes out, right? It just gives them power, gives them some control in the moment. And they're not just being kind of taught, do this. And also, let's be honest, as parents, it's easy as we're trying to prep for food to say, hey, go, here's a screen. It's easy. It's so convenient, right? But if they can be involved somehow, even in just the simplest way, it gets them away from a screen or whatever else, and gives them some, autonomy. That's what they want.
Mm-hmm. This is going to be a little curveball, but because of the way some laws are changing throughout the country, and also some specific things happening in the state of Texas, I would say, and I also am thinking about how many visits I've had with families recently with teenage kids who have had suicidal ideation and everything, and I'm thinking about the parties. There is a lot of marijuana, cannabis, different derivatives of marijuana that are being marketed as medicinal for ADHD. Oh. And it is important to know that that is not based in science. That is not based in research. In fact, the majority of the research that I'm reading is showing that it negatively impacts the same parts of the brain that are behind developmentally for those with ADHD. And so
it reinforces the weaknesses, essentially.
Yeah. And think about, like, for all of us when we're growing up, the last part of our brain, we grow from the brainstem up and forward to the frontal lobe. A lot of what it impacts are frontal lobe skills, which are already usually can be 3 years behind and maybe never catch up with those with ADHD. And they're finding that a lot of the damage that's being done to the developing brain may not be reversible. Some of it might be, some of it might not be. And there is a 4 to 7 times greater chance of becoming addicted to these substances, depending on the study you look at, if you start them before the age of 18 or 25. And afterwards, you still got to be careful, but your brain is developed. The biggest concerns right now are on how it impacts the developing brain, and especially it's impacting areas that are already impacted by those with neurodevelopmental struggles. So, and individuals with ADHD already can have more addictive tendencies sometimes because they have less dopamine releases and they seek that rush, and then they get it from this. So I just wanted to mention that because there are a lot of laws swirling around and things changing across the country, but also in the state of Texas right now. And there might be some uses for that, for pain, or there might be certain things that are uses, but it is not necessarily, I would say, probably not indicated. I'm not giving you medical advice, but I am saying it is probably not well used as medicinal for ADHD. And in fact, it can very much argue with certain medications that these kids are on already. So be aware. That I am keeping up with this research. So this is not a blanket statement about use in all scenarios. I am talking specifically about kids whose brains are still developing and they have neurodevelopmental struggles. I'm not anti using this for medicinal purposes. It can be great for pain. There are some good uses that are being found for Parkinson's, et cetera. I'm talking about developing brain, ADHD, that kind of thing. I just had to throw that out there because that's on my heart, and I'm connecting it to a lot of specific a lot of a trend that I'm seeing coming through our centers.
Okay, well, this is I've read a little bit of the research. I wouldn't say I'm not even close up to date as you are right now. So, so what you're saying is right now it's being marketed. I don't know if it's specifically being marketed in Texas, but it's being marketed as something medicinally for those with ADHD to use.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. And it's just not the case. There is no research that I have read. Now, some people will say that, it decreases their anxiety, and anxiety is so often co-occurring, but it is decreasing the neural connections in the parts of the brain that you need to make good decisions and to regulate. So it might have this temporary feeling, but then the long-term damage to the brain where they would be able to have that feeling without the need for that substance. So if you suspect or know that your kids, and this is just, there's really a big risk with the way the laws are changing. It's becoming more accessible. It's kind of party season is underway, it's really starting. If you suspect your kids of dabbling in this, trying it, keep all this in mind. You don't want to be judgmental, harsh. You want to make sure you're calm. If you're angry when you find out, wait till you're calm. You deserve settling time. And then you want to approach them and say, I found this, or I heard this, or whatever. Tell me about this. What made you interested in trying this? Or if they've already done it, how did it make you feel when you did it? Ask very calm, information-seeking, interest-based questions. And then share with them why it's going to be a rule in the house not to use it. And if you catch them being dishonest with you about use, do not call them a liar. A person that is a label, just like a person is more than an ADHD label. You're a liar. No, you can be a person of integrity who told a lie. That is a choice in a moment versus labeling character. So even on a difficult topic like this, be careful about that. I just had to mention that because we're talking about party season, and I'm seeing what's happening out there. So
I'll be honest with you, I didn't know that was. I haven't seen the advertising for that, so that's good to know. That's not something that's on my radar currently. So I'm glad you brought that up. And actually, we have a comment here. Thank you for mentioning this. Kids are now using Delta 8, which is a legal variation or derivative of it. Legal in I think most states. I think 45-ish. I do know that was legal here in Texas. So
thank you, Natalia. Yeah, it is becoming more and more accessible, and there are more laws happening that make it. And I get it. It is not like this is bad across the board in all scenarios. Yeah. We're talking about specific pockets of things to be concerned about and aware of. It can very much harm brain development. Is pretty consistently what the research is showing us, particularly with those who are already having developmental lags. I
have read some research, and they're saying that they don't think it's reversible, and it can be in some cases, but there's from what I read, significant percentage that is not reversible. So definitely very good. But I know why they're targeting them, but I mean, come on, guys, come on. All right. Well, thank you for that comment. I do appreciate that. And Heather, thank you for bringing that up. Again, I certainly was not aware that they were actively targeting ADHD individuals. I do know it's available, and it's becoming more prevalent, right? But that's good to know that it's something that I watched before and help add my questions and helps me understand the kiddos better. So I appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, we're at about the little over 20-minute mark. We have a few people watching. I'll give you guys a moment to ask any questions. But go ahead and ask those if you have any. Thank you for the comment again. We really appreciate that. But Heather, people always ask, where can I find Heather? Where do I find her?
At the Hidden Churn on Instagram or Facebook, or Brain Balance of the Woodlands, Katy, Mansfield, or South Lake.
Awesome. Make sure you follow those pages. She also has a podcast Tuesdays at 11. Do you have one coming up this weekend or this week? Sorry.
It's going to be Q&A. So y'all tune in and ask questions. Yeah.
Ooh, I might fire off a couple questions. All right. Make sure you follow those pages. Make sure you jump in on those. That other podcast, always great material. Q&As are always a great time. They can be very, very informative. And so go ask some questions. Heather's always, Heather doesn't prep for any of this stuff. She just rattles it off the top of her head. That's how smart she is. So she makes me look good through proxy. So I appreciate that. If you need to get a hold of me, 972-387-4700. And as always, if you do watch this and you have a question or even a concern, last week's was a little bit more, somber. That's what I'm looking for. We are always here to help, whether that be refer you out to somebody else, help you directly, whatever that may be. We are here for you. So please do not hesitate to direct message us or reach out to us. We are happy to always help you out. We're going to be talking about this again next week. We'll be a little bit more concentrated in on some things with getting ready for this because there is a lot that goes into these up and coming 8-ish weeks. And lots of parents. I mean, one of my busiest times of year is will be the start of 2022, right? Can't believe it, but there will be parents pulling their hair out because it's been a long 8 weeks. So The goal of this is to help you prep for this, to make it through this, and we want our kids to do in our community and our families in our community to do and be their best. And so, hopefully, these next few weeks will be very helpful for you. All right, Heather, thank you as always. Thank you for educating me on something I was not aware of, so I appreciate that. Always learning. I don't see any questions coming through. We will be back. Let's see. Next week we got 2 more weeks, and then we'll have Thanksgiving. So we'll be back for 2 more weeks. At a little adjusted time, but we will be back next week. Thank you all. Thank you for watching. Thank you for the comments. And as always, if this could help somebody else, please share with them. Thank you so much.
Excellent. Bye.